Are you? We'll go ahead and call the meeting of the Finance Committee today. Mike is right back here. Yeah. We'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. The date is April 7th, 2023. The Finance Committee is a standing committee. Can you hear it?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. That's fine. I don't need. Is a standing committee of 2 council members, currently Paul McCoy and Colleen Baker, the city manager, city treasurer, and the finance director. The Finance Committee considers and makes recommendations on matters referred to it by the city council relating to finance, budget, audits, capital planning, and debt. Okay, public comment. This is a time for public comments regarding items that are not on the agenda. Public comment period is not intended to be a question and answer period or conversations with the council or staff. Excuse me. Council members, when recognized by the committee, may ask questions of the presenter, but no action may be taken by the city council during the public comment section of the meeting. Please speak from the podium. Please state your name for the record prior to providing your comments. Please address the council as, please address the committee as a whole. If you have documents to present, please provide a minimum of 6 copies, and please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Okay, so we have no public comment here in the chambers. Do we have any public comment online?
We do not.
Okay, so there is no public comment online. I mean, if you were to come on right now, you'd need to put your hand up. So, okay, no public comment online. So we'll go on to item 3, public comment follow-up. And this is a time for the Finance Committee of the city manager to respond to public comments, and they may direct staff to prepare a report or place an item on a future agenda. And since there's no public comment, are there any finance committees or Councilman Baker? Do we have, I mean, no, I'm going to assume no follow-up. Are we comfortable with that?
Yes.
I am.
Because if we needed to direct, we could also do that at another time. So, yeah, I mean, so there'll be no public comment follow-up because there is no public comment. So item 4 is discussion, and we're gonna A, review of June 30th, 2022 audited financial statements and independent auditors report. And that will probably be Emily.
Yes. Thank you.
Dancer.
Councilmember.
Dancer. I'm sorry.
Went way back on the names.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. That happens at times. 5, update on capital construction projects that are active this summer. Excuse me, B. C, update of utility rate study, and D, update of budget process. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over for item A to Emily Aldridge. I'm terribly sorry, Emily.
No worries. It's fine. It's fine. The big item on the agenda today is the review of the June 30th, 2022 audited financial statements and independent auditors report. We got a relatively good audit. They finished up in November. We got our financials back January. We did some review and some update of different items. You have in your packet the full audited financials along with the independent auditors report. And this year we were subject to a single audit because we received over $750,000 in federal funds. We did some things I wanted to point out. If you look at page 31, which is our statement of revenue and expenditures, you can see that our general fund balance increased by $209,941. So that is good, which means either we kept our expenses down, which I believe we did. But things to remember is this fiscal year was supplemented by ARPA funds, which is somewhat one-time funding. So we'll need to make sure we keep an eye on our expenditures going into 23-24 and in the current year. Another item I wanted to point out as a reminder is if you look at page 26, we still have a net pension liability of $6.2 million. That number is down from the prior year, which means we're doing good in funding our pension liability, but there's still more work to be done there, which is part of our budgeting process going forward. we are trying to address those issues.
Are you looking at page 26 of the complete packet or page 26 of the
26
report?
of the complete packet.
Okay,
Sorry, I was going with complete packet numbers. Sorry if I'm throwing people off. We did have 2 audit findings. Those are located all the way at the very end of your packet. It's the very last page. The first one was a finding on our CFA, which is a spreadsheet we provide to the auditors stating how much money we spent in federal monies, and it should reconcile back to our ledger. The spreadsheet we provided did not. We were able to reconcile it at the end and say, this is where all the money went and this is where it is. So no money is unaccounted for or anything like that. It's simply, we didn't have our ducks in a row to begin with. So our response to that is that we have now added the 2 positions of staff accountants that have been charged with the responsibility of working with public works projects managers to ensure there is complete and accurate reconciliation of that and to the general ledger on a more routine basis. So not just at the end of the year, but we're doing it more frequently. The second finding was on our CDBG grants or loans that we have with individuals. We were unaware that we needed to have a current utility bill for each one of those, confirming that the person who has the loan is actually living there. And we are rectifying that with a year-end checklist that we will go through in June and make sure we have all of those pieces of documentation.
and about how many of those do we have?
I believe there's 6
Okay, great.
left, and 1 will be resolved shortly as he has passed. And we've spoken with his daughter, and her intention is to sell the home and fulfill all of its outstanding obligations so that we can be done with that one.
Yes.
Yeah, that will be lovely. These are, they're not fun loans.
Do we have more going out at any time, or is it a program that's
The
passed?
program has ended.
It's ended, okay, yeah.
We're just,
That's fine.
unfortunately, we're stuck still monitoring
Yeah.
and following up, and we have to send out invoices every month, and it's just, there's a lot of work involved with them.
Understood. Thank you.
That it's I believe it's still available. Like we could still hypothetically do this program, and it's just do not recommend because we become the bad guy trying to collect on somebody who then is in a bad spot because we are the middlemen at that point because the money's coming from somewhere else. And so we get forced to collect. And I know Retta had to deal with this. And the alternative is better to do what we're attempting to do with developers and grants, and then the state giving money to the developer who then manages that process, and the city doesn't have to engage because it is a lot of work to engage the CDBG loan process. And yeah, I don't recommend that we do it.
Do they provide, what's the word? No, go on. Never mind. I lost it. I'll think of it and I'll ask you afterwards.
Does anyone have any questions regarding the audit concerns? I plan on bringing it to full council at the next council meeting for the acceptance of the audit. It's really more of a procedural, there's nothing we can change in this document. It's already been submitted to the federal government. We've met all of our deadlines, etc. It's just a formality of making sure that it's there. It's already posted on our website and available for the public.
I would, as Councilman McCoy, I would recommend to the council
To accept the
that
financials as presented.
yeah, that we would accept as presented. The 2 things that, and you and I've talked about these 2 things already, as well as I've met with both Retta and Jason regarding it. And I would just say that those are, when I look at how we were audited at schools annually, that those were things that, sometimes we learn where to put, if there are new things that come up and sometimes, if it was a large amount of money that we were missing or that we had to put out because we had failed at doing something like it was $200,000 or $300,000, but the fact that they say you have to put this $25,000 or $30,000 in this revenue, from this revenue stream going into this pile and change it on paper, it does not concern me like that. So I don't know how, Councilwoman Councilwoman Bakerfield, I'm sorry, I'm off today.
I had an opportunity to use this document as a sleep aid
Oh,
during the
excellent.
week.
No. Sleep aid.
It worked.
It works wonders.
Oh, my God.
I'm so fresh.
Slept like a baby.
I needed it last night.
I didn't see anything in here
Okay.
that concerns me at all. So,
Fantastic.
good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Item B was just a quick update. The rest of these items are pretty much just informative, letting you guys know where we're at on things and working forward. Capital construction projects that are coming up this summer will be South Oregon Street, where that's a grant we received in 2019, correct? Older than that. And so that construction will get underway. We anticipate having some financial needs over and above what the grant has given based off of construction costs, et cetera, have gone up. So we have planned for that accordingly and have funds set aside to help make those matches happen. Additionally, we will be working on the Burgess Street project. That's this summer, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the summer.
Okay, I'm not.
And we internally, we call it the Burgess Street project because we just do it primarily in that area, but it's considered the wastewater or something or other. It's
Yeah.
got some other name.
Collection system improvement.
There we go.
It's a
Wastewater
very
collection.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
Collection system improvement project, wastewater collection system improvement project. And that's how it's, that's how it's referenced on paper. And so, because it includes different points within the city, but the most drastic work, and I think why everyone in that area is excited is that we're going to rip the road up so much, we're going to replace it. And that road needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was there did I tell you yesterday or the day before, and walking the neighborhood, and they are very excited about getting it done, and they're very thankful to the city, and they're very thankful to you as city manager, because they felt they were blown off for many years by a couple of the city managers.
Well, Retta and I spent a couple nice afternoons in Joyce Dakota's home and walked.
Only one for me.
Yeah.
More visitation.
Yeah, it's disappointing because ultimately my understanding is those homes were moved when the freeway went in, and originally it was a dirt road. And as a lot of roads in rural communities got formed, it was more than likely gravel, and then they just chip sealed the gravel. And so unfortunately, there's no sidewalk over there, and there's an issue where water basically will pool in your yard, and then it'll permeate back up through the road, thereby cracking it. And I think the true fix to that road is a gigantic project that we would have to fund ourselves. Is the state?
Drainage too.
Yeah, the state's just not going to fund a project over there that is a brand new road to that level of capital. So I think in the past, there was just concern over fixing it, knowing that inevitably it just deteriorates, but all roads do. And so we're just looking for a 10-year fix where then we can just continue to chip seal. Because if you've been over in this neighborhood, it's heinous. I mean, some of the pots in the road or the holes in the road, I mean, they're just gigantic. You got to go very slow. So yeah, it's better that we do what we're about to do, and then we just put it on the chip seal and just keep chip sealing it. That's really what's going to make it a better experience. But we're not putting sidewalks in. So.
And they're aware of that. Do we know, because they said they were aware of it, do we know, are we going to contact them kind of a couple times prior to starting and just remind them that it's going to be going on?
Oh, yeah.
Newsletter or something, or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what we do, what Ben does and all that, they go out and they get door hangers. I mean, they knock on doors when there's a project of this size, and they definitely alert everybody because there's going to be a level of
Your house for a while.
yeah, exactly. You're not going to be able to park on a street because it's not going to be there.
Yeah, and they're aware of that. The people I talked to, they said that the inconvenience is minor compared to what they're getting. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what my first told me. So. But, and then I was gonna ask one other, but I can't now.
So I have a question, and this is just a general question, and it's because I'm still learning a lot. You said that the grant for South Oregon Street was received in 2019, and I know that that was a bizarre period in the history of the world. But so what's the typical turnaround time from the time that we receive a grant until it's implemented? I'm just kind of curious if there's a general time frame or.
Doesn't it usually depend on what the grant says and the project itself?
Yeah, there's a generally term on the grant, like with the flood hazard reduction, it was a 5-year grant. It's
Oh, okay.
been extended now.
For another 5 or 6 years, yeah.
Yeah, but this particular, and as I think you're very well aware, some of the grants, bizarrely enough, the money for the soil removal on Foothill from DTSC, they just sent us a check, which is very uncommon.
Actually, they didn't.
They didn't they claim that they were?
They told Juliana, oh yeah, the check's in the mail along with the paperwork. And so we kept looking for this check and looking for this check.
Uh-huh.
And I'm panicking because I'm like, I don't know where the check went. And Juliana finally called them and she's like, we've never received a check. They're like, oh no, you got to go through this whole payment process thing. And I was like, oh.
So that's perfect because that's exactly what we're used to. And that's kind of came up with the pool where people felt like we were sitting on $8.5 million and we're going to give it back, but it's a request for reimbursement most of the time. And then, but I'm not sure what the general lead time
The
was.
steps are kind of interesting. Is that on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, the STIP grants, even though sometimes we get the letters of funding, they don't allocate it. So we could have a funding notice, but they don't allocate the funds. And that's always interesting because they're kind of like juggling with projects. So this one, I think it was a little more complex in the engineering because there was infill that had to be assessed because if they had repaved it, it's on fill dirt that they knew would not hold the pavement. So, I mean, Matt went to a lot of effort to get soil engineers in to how to best deal with, I think it's by Jim Wilson Ford, kind of that area, is that right?
Yeah.
There's also kind of an underground drainage going on. So they took their time to really assess how to deal with the road bed. And so part of this is why Emily may have mentioned already about the match is that kind of outside the scope of STIP, but they're going to be doing some underground utilities and work on that to stabilize that road bed so that when they do the pavement, it doesn't slide away in a couple of years.
Yeah, and it is interesting because a lot of this happens at the LTC on the STIP funding. And I can
LTC.
remember, I can remember there was a project at the county that was on that list and funded for, it's still not done. It was over 10 years old for a bridge. And so I don't know, but so I think that there's like a pooling of money into the region through LTC on a lot of these road projects. And then it's divvied up at the LTC. People are vying for a project to get funded because they can't fund all these big projects. And when you just give someone $80,000 for a project, you don't get much out of it. So I think there must be an extended period when it comes to road funding. But generally, I think you're pretty aware of this, Matt, based off of being the clerk is.
But in response to Councilwoman Baker's, there's money that the LTC, through the LTC, that the city got to put in to asphalt from the Greenhorn Lake up the upper park, from down where you turn into the substation, the power substation, just below the dam, there's a power substation, to asphalt a bike trail, right, and it follows Greenhorn up and ties into the existing bike trail on the west side of that beautiful bridge that goes over the dam.
Mhm.
That money was probably 5 years ago,
Yeah.
6 years ago. And when I asked Ben, and he goes, and Jason is where the money's, it's only like 60 or 70 or $80,000. The money's there, but the dilemma has been getting the manpower because it's a job we can do and do effectively, do a nice bike. And so it's something that things go, well, we're gonna try and do it this year, and then what happens, you get to the end of the year and you're still chip sealing, so, but the money, that money's not going anywhere. Of course, it's not $1 million or $2 million. But that kind of, that also gives you a look at some of them. May I ask a question? I think you've already answered this, and I do have my hearing aids in, but it's just, this is a yes or no question. We have secured already a firm that will start, correct, on South Oregon?
No, I think it still needs to go out to bid.
Okay,
Yeah, I believe.
I think
it-
so, yeah.
Is it out? I
It
thought
may
it-
be out.
I think
might
it's
be
out to
out.
bid right now.
and
I do
Let me
believe.
check the bid.
Madam City Clerk, you mentioned this, and I'm sorry I didn't catch it all. My understanding is that we probably won't be replacing drainage down there, but we will have to go in some areas deeper because that was a mill down there at Peters Truck Lines. And when the road was originally built, they said they didn't go down and establish a road bed, so it's built over a lot of bark and stuff that where water percolates through. It is, do you know anything about that, or has that been discussed?
I would have to address. the bid.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
would speak
the reality of what would take place down there is probably a $10 million project to do it correctly.
How much money do we have?
1 million. So we're there, that's all accounted for to put the best road back up there. But the reason that road is alligatored, they call that cracking, alligator cracking, is because there is essentially a stream that used to run underneath or over in that section from the mill. And you'll see water kind of when there's no rain. I drove past there recently and I was like, oh my God, there's water everywhere on this road. And so that's another scenario where this is not going to be perfect, but nothing truly is. And ultimately it needs it so bad that, doing this and then coming back through and chip sealing and then doing this project again in 30 years, essentially is what we're going to end up doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Not now, anyway, not right
Okay.
now.
We are in the midst of working on our utility rate study that we're hoping to have completed in August-ish timeframe. We're working with Pace Engineering. They've given us some preliminary numbers. We're going through and sitting down with Public Works, discussing what their needs are over the next 5 years and how the rates will be able to reflect to suffice those needs. So we've met with Public Works and gotten some of their input. We're continuing to work through the rest of the numbers, making sure they jive with what we feel is going to happen over the next 5 years. And then we'll get that back to Pace, and then they will come back to Finance and the full council with, this is our proposed rates based off of the study, and we will proceed from there.
And how can you use the utility rate, the fees that are collected?
They can only, what we collect for water can only be used for water. What we collect for sewer can only be used for sewer.
Okay.
So these funds are specifically just to keep our water and sewer facilities going.
Correct.
Yeah, and I mean, they're really used, employee, obviously pay and salary and stuff like that. And the percentage of whoever's doing utility billing up here gets a portion of that. And then primarily, I feel like they're used as a match really for, at the moment, there's so much money in the state revolving fund that we don't have to match 25% or 5% or any percentage at the moment to a $30 million project. But what we have to do is we have to pay for Pace Engineering to put together a project. And sometimes those applications you'll see them on the city council agendas where we're paying Pace $300,000. And ultimately that's where we're getting the money. It's kind of the backbone to start that process. Invest $300,000 on the one that we're currently doing is a $30+ million project for the wastewater treatment plant. But that is an interesting question because multiple cities in the state of California have gotten in big trouble for spending this money where they should not have been spending it. And
What do you mean if it was water and sewer, they spent it for something else?
general fund,
Oh.
ridiculous pay to the city manager, like crazy
City
pay.
of Bell.
Bell. I was gonna
Yep,
say,
City of
yeah,
Bell.
That would just be common sense, wouldn't it be?
I-
Councilwoman?
I would think so.
Must be right
You
in
know,
Orange County, maybe.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
so how will the increase in the diff fees affect, that have any effect on the utility rates?
No.
Okay.
No, that has no effect on those. So we will go through the process. Council will approve the rate study. And then we go out for the 218 process.
It
Yeah,
has a like a,
Can I clarify a little bit on that?
absolutely.
So when they're doing the master planning for that and they know what we need on capital or infrastructure and what component of growth that is, they will budget in the rate study that growth should pay for those impacts on it. Whether or not we get the dollars timely, for when those improvements need to be made. The timing's never always in sync, but what we're building is that. And so historically, we've had some projects where we didn't have the diff, but we took on debt. And so that did hit what we should have had for diff. Diff is paying for part of that debt servicing going forward, because maybe it's a $10 million improvement. 20% of it's attributable to growth, so 20% of 10 million. 2 million should come historically from diff, but we didn't have the funds, but we moved forward with the project. So Emily is now debt servicing because we borrowed for 40 years for those growth impacts. So it's intertwined in there a little bit. So they are meaningful in our capital projects for that portion that's attributable to growth.
is it appropriate, Retta, to say if we had no diff at all for water and sewer, inevitably the 218 would then take into consideration, and then ultimately the public would end up paying?
Yeah, and we did note that when we were under collecting on it, that basically the public was subsidizing growth and the cost estimate of that, like per month. If you look at an old rate study, because of that disclosure, that basically you need to be transparent to the public, that basically you as a ratepayer are subsidizing, the tractor supply, because we weren't collecting enough for that improvement.
Does that mean I should get my peanuts for my Blue Jays for free?
Absolutely. Get your licorice too, and your gummy, chewy candies that they have at the register.
My neighbor, he puts peanuts out, and the chipmunks have got an alternate dwelling unit. Next door, I told Blaine
They have an
Johnson, I said,
ADU.
Yeah, they come along, they steal the peanuts from Steve, from the Blue Jays, and then they go along the fence, and they go up one tree and then jump to the bigger tree there. But I said, you've got an ADU for the gray mountain brown squirrel.
I think,
Oh my God.
Emily, do you want to touch on maybe some things that'll be in the rate study that'll affect billing and who pays?
Oh, yes. Good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
We are wanting to have in the rate study that if you own more than 3, I think that's what we decided was a good breaking point. More than 3 rental homes, that is now a business, and that your rentals need to stay in your name, and that you would be responsible for the payment of those. So like the Michelle Hills, we spend an exorbitant amount of time of renter in, renter out, making sure it is a legal renter, making sure all of these things, and then trying to collect from renters once they move out, they still have an outstanding bill. We are wanting to have them keep it in the property owner's name. And so they would be responsible for a collection of that from their renter. So either increased rent.
Pass it on to the renter.
Exactly. It'll be part of their rent. What it does for us, it not only saves us a ton of time of renter in, renter out. It also helps us with, having to turn off the water because your renter hasn't paid it. And now someone's living in a home that is not theirs, and they're living there without water.
Well, that would help with Michelle, with Charlie Harrison, with
Collins.
some of your larger property owners.
Yes.
And they can, what they can do, they do it in other places, is that you figure that into the rental.
Yes.
That's all figured into the rent that they're paying.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we deal with quite a bit is unfortunately, there's kind of this idea that we're in just this tiny town and people's word is as good as a contract. And so what has happened is that we've had instances where somebody called and brokered a deal in the past that ultimately they didn't have any right to broker, and then was requesting the city treat somebody in a very specific way on a bill. And so our requirement is that you have to physically come in here and you have to give us a signed piece of paper stating that, you're the property owner and this is what you're allowing us to do. That way we have something to lean on. And once in a while, there are still just a handful of people that do a lot of work around here, flipping homes and renting homes that have had a hard time coming to that compliance level because they feel like they should just be allowed to call us and tell us X, Y, and Z. And we always say, we need you to come in here because we need a document for our file. Otherwise, we're going to get into he said, she said. There's been divorces that transpire, and then you have two people technically still owning something, but then we don't have the divorce paperwork to prove somebody else owns it. And then you have the person that has no ownership stake, but we don't know yet, making decisions for how the utility bill happens at a location. So I'm just making you guys aware of this because
It really is a bigger issue. I mean, right now I have to go call someone because somebody illegally sublet the rental. And so we're now in the middle of all of it because we've now turned off the water because nobody's paying them. So it does take a lot of time. Some additional costs we were looking at is wrapping in the dollar. It's $1, right? For the cellular. We're putting in meters that have cellular service. So we get charged for that service, but it will enable the property owner to get real-time feedback of what their readings are. So when we tell them, hey, you've got a leak, they can look it up on their own phone and say, oh yeah, it's leaking in the middle of the night. I've got a running toilet. Or, oh yeah, it's been, high for the last 6 days. I got to get a plumber over here to fix this.
So if
Yeah,
you've logged
that's what it
into
does.
Pacific Power and looked at your daily, has anybody done that? Looked at your daily use?
Me.
Now I just pay it. Pacific Power daily.
Yeah,
You can go on Pacific Power Online and you can look and see what your daily usage is.
like I can always tell if I cook or do laundry on the weekend because it goes like this. And the same with the water consumption. It would be that real time interactive data with the ratepayer.
That's a good point. I
Wow,
mean,
that's a little scary.
yeah, and that's one thing to always consider and keep in mind. And it's that's the biggest difference between us and the county is that when it comes to taking the wastewater and supplying clean water, you can look at us as though we are SoCal Edison, we are PG&E, we are PP&L. We are a utility at that point. And when it comes to paying for the product that we're selling, ultimately, we need that money coming in order to continue
Well,
to
and that's
supply
where
that
the
service.
issue, I think, fell with when council refused to raise rates for 10 or 15 years, and then we got it. I think I was probably on historic commission at the time, and we're all going, why are you raising it so much now? Well, you haven't raised for 20 years. You got to raise it gradually if you can. Case in point, for this grants passed for their new sewer, the public works director said on the news last night that they would have to raise somewhere over in the neighborhood of $20 to $22 a month per home for the next 5 years just to be able to get a loan to start servicing the debt.
Yeah, it'll catch up with you one way or the next. And I'm not going to mention the cities here in Siskiyou County, but I'm going to mention a scenario, but I'm not going to mention the particular city. But at one of the LOLA meetings, it was discussed that because the city hadn't raised rates on the 218, that the state would not grant them state revolving dollars. And so that's another important aspect, just to stay current.
So we have as a city, as a council, we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we are prudent with the money that we're given, and that we make sure that we keep up with what the city should be getting in order to keep things up, because it would be financially irresponsible for us to let, for instance, I'll just say, to let a sewer or water plant go for 12 or 15 years when we could get money from the state like we're doing now to be able to do the Burgess Street project and everything else. It's not, basically it shows that we financially, that we are not doing our due diligence and we're not doing our job. Whether we agree with it or not, whether I agree with it or not. And again, that's part of what I got out of California League of Cities when I went to my training. They said to me, and I had to talk to Steve coming back, I said, you know, I disagree with this, but here's the deal. Financially, for the citizens of Yreka, this is what we have to do. And so that's where the diff fees too are very important, rather than trying to raise them all in one fell swoop. You know, try and keep up with it. So that, I mean, that's my thought. You know, if I raise my refrigerators at Sears, if I just, like after 6 years, I just said, you know what, I gotta raise this Samsung from 1,200 to 1,800, I wouldn't sell it.
Right.
You know, when it's, you know, it had to be done every year at a certain amount.
So how often are these fees reviewed?
Every 5 years.
Okay,
So we'll have 5 years and there'll be a gradual increase between each of those 5 years.
okay.
And then we'll reevaluate again at the end of those 5. I don't anticipate seeing any major spikes between what the rate is now in the first year.
Yeah, I don't, they've got a couple of things going on, because we are expecting some of these capital grants. You can really think how much the state is really assisting the city's ratepayer, with state funding for these, improvement projects that Jason talked about, like the sewer system. If you had to collect a $33 million project over about 3,500 ratepayers, you can imagine how expensive that is. And
Yeah.
so we are fortunate in the partnership that PACE has with Public Works has with PACE on moving these projects through for because we're coming into a level 4 plant. That we will have to have a SCADA system. So I still think, you know, they're going to go up, but I think that's why we like to, you know, kind of graduate them so there's not sticker shock, as I went through in 2008 when I had to bring it from, I believe it was $15 to 35.
Ooh.
And that was pretty on the sewer rate. That was pretty, you know, tough for a lot of people.
Emily, can you just real quick, and I think this is something when we do the comms would be very interesting to do, but if we call it a utility bill here, because a lot of people want to call it a water bill, and your water is definitely on there, but the collection of Measure H, the collection of the landfill, that's how we go and collect, is on the utility bill. And can you just real quickly talk about the 2 different water charges that you get? Like there's a base.
Oh.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are 2 water charges on your utility bill. One is your base rate. Doesn't matter if your water's on, doesn't matter if you use any water at all. It is always what the base rate is. And then you have your consumption rate. So you're given 100 gallons as part of your base rate. Anything over 100 gallons, you are charged at a rate, which I can't recall what it is off the top of my head. Do you know?
Which the base rate and the consumptive rate?
Yeah. I can't remember what the consumption rate is. It's pretty
Oh,
low.
it's about $2 per thousand. Let me look
Yeah.
real fast here.
I was like, it's pretty
Nothing.
minimal.
But
But
this is one thing that we'll hear sometimes, is that somebody bought a property, but then didn't turn the water on and doesn't understand why they have to pay their water bill, but inevitably their Measure H is attached to that and their base rates
Yes.
attached to that as well. So even if you don't turn the water on, the day you take ownership of the property, you will be charged and prorated by that date
correct.
because it's a utility bill. So
Correct. That's what a lot of people don't understand, is once you take ownership, as of that day, all of those base fees are yours.
Yeah.
So we hear this a lot. Well, just turn it off. I don't want to have to pay my utility bill anymore. Well, sorry, but you're still gonna have the utility bill. Like, it's still in existence. We can turn it off for you if you want, but you're still gonna be charged. And that a lot of the public doesn't understand that. And they will argue that fact of, oh, you didn't turn me on, so I shouldn't have to pay for any of that. But the rates are associated with the land, not with any sort of usage.
That's less than,
Thank you.
1/10 of a cent per gallon.
Yeah, it's real,
It's a very inexpensive. Again, I just look at the water bills that we paid and what we paid. Of course, we use Colorado River water, it's much more expensive, but you know, our average water bill on my mother-in-law's farm ran around 40 to 50,000 monthly for 4,000 acres. So, you know, I look at that and I go, and I compare that, just like when I first moved here, I compared electricity. I was living on minor and I had propane and they said, oh, don't use propane to heat. And I went, no, that's all we got at the time because we were young and poor and just starting out. And I think my bill came in at 300 one month and I went, wow. And somebody up next door to me said, that is outrageous. And I go, well, that's interesting because we were paying about 800,000 a month to air condition our house. This is in 1985 and 86. In Southern California, we were paying $800,000 a month to air condition it through May, June, July, August, September, when it was 100 to 120 degrees. So it's kind of all relative too. And you know, we get kind of spoiled up here, and that's why we love it here. I mean, really, that's why I mean, you were born here, I know you were born here. But you know, the reason the rest of us are is because we love it. But we got to pay for those amenities. And I hate to say it, but we do have to pay for those amenities. Otherwise, we become like Thermal and Mecca and Coachella.
so in conjunction with the utility rate study, we are in the middle of our budget process as well. We are doing a 2-year budget again this year, so we're budgeting for 23-24 and 24-25. We've met with all of the department heads. They have put in their wish list. And we're now working on our revenue projections to say, oh, no, take that off. You know this process.
Yeah.
You know, everybody
Very
comes in
familiar
with their
with it.
giant wish
Build it up and
list.
take
And
it
then I go,
off.
oh, no, sorry, try again.
Yeah.
So we will be hammering out those where we're shortfalls, et cetera, because there will be, because the wish list is always bigger than the revenue stream. But we're working towards that, and hopefully we will have that for you guys here soon to review. Yeah. So lots of simultaneous projects that all kind of tie into each other.
May I go back to something that you talked about?
Absolutely.
Yeah, unfunded liability, Retta. That probably needs to be something we need to talk about again in finance, and we probably, I think the last time we put any money in there.
We're engaging a firm to do some
Okay.
analysis with us. I think they sent us some dates. I just need to circle back with Jason and Emily on those dates, but
think
yes,
you're right.
we're looking at that.
I just, and not because I don't think you're doing it, but just because I know it took us 10 years in Yreka Union Elementary School District. You know, took the foresight of Bob Singleton and then 10 years to get it fully funded.
It's a longer haul here,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's
Because we know we're gonna pay the piper.
it's the elephant in the room, yeah.
Okay, it's the elephant in the room. Okay,
Our
thank you.
elephant is much smaller than other places, trust me.
No, I know that.
Retta has done an amazing job of funding as much stuff as she has. Like, it's
Yeah.
surprising. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
this
you
is
did, you
exciting.
did wonderful. You know, I mean, we funded it once or twice in the 4.5 years I've been on, so
Little bites. Yep.
that's all I had. And that relates back to when we were talking about.
Emily, yeah, maybe we
Uh,
can do that at the next meeting.
Yeah,
with,
absolutely.
And yeah, we got the email on some dates, I think.
Yeah, I think they.
I just have it flagged in my to be worked email
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, now, I think I provided them our financials. They were wanting those.
Oh, okay.
So
good.
I believe I did pass those along.
Okay.
May I ask one more question? Because ARPA monies are, we've talked about, I'm only asking something because we've talked about it
Mhm.
on this. ARPA monies, the one-time money that we have used to, for lack of a better thought or word, balance the budget. Are ARPA monies, as far as the federal government goes, are they gone now? Has that gone away? What's just the quick down and dirty on that?
We're still receiving our allocation over the next 3 years.
So it's 3 years, okay, 3 more
Yeah,
years. okay,
Because we
thank
got
you.
1 year and we have 3 more years. Yeah. 'cause
But
it
it's,
was-
but it's a
25
finite
it
amount of
ends.
money, correct?
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
in total, I believe it was 1.8. And we've already received 449 and we'll receive another 449 this year.
Thank you for that briefing.
Yeah, I think we could have possibly, if we said, oh, we're going to do some very specialized project, we could have gotten more, but since we have decided, rightfully so, to put that into our budget shortfall is it's just spread out over,
Yeah.
it was like 4 years or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, because luckily our allocation was under 10 million, so our reporting requirements are pretty nil.
Yeah.
I just did it yesterday. And all we say is that it's covering our revenue shortfalls.
And with those, don't
due
you,
to COVID.
do you bill for it at the end of the year?
No, they send us our allocation. I believe it's in like August
Gotcha. Thank
that
you.
it'll come in.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's weird reporting times. I have to report April to April,
Okay.
which is bizarre.
That
Sorry-
is.
Sorry to do that, but we talked about both of those.
It doesn't
I
coordinate
just
with
wanted-
anything.
Maybe the start of COVID.
Oh,
What's
look
that?
at you,
Yeah,
probably.
ARPA's start of COVID, and it was great. The money was wonderful, but the process was insanity.
At the county?
Just in general,
In
because
general.
they created a template of rules, but they weren't actual rules yet. They needed to get approved by some body or Congress, and ultimately it went from semi-final rules to final rules. And then at the very end, it was determined if you had under $10 million, you could pretty much do. There was hardly any oversight. And
Yeah.
so it was like trying to learn all these different rules that then inevitably never applied to us.
So unless you guys have any other questions, that's all I had to brief you guys on, get you up to date on board of what's coming your way. And then we'll get this on the next council meeting.
Madam
Sweet.
Councilwoman, do you have any more questions? I don't either. Retta, Emily, Jason, anything more for the good of the order? Okay, well, our meeting, our finance committee meeting